Bobby Freeman is still with me. He's a barrister and political commentator. But I'm just wondering, Bobby, have you been bothered by any of these Insulate Britain protests? Have they hit you where you live at all, or have you been concerned about them?
So, not directly, but I've been concerned in terms of planning journeys. To give you a kind of, it sounds a silly example, but a friend of mine who had a very sick pet and needed to get to a vet to carry out a CT scan and couldn't in fact plan to do that because it involved going around the M25.
Yeah.
And
you can't be sure.
Can't be sure, and you can't have a really sick animal that needs to get to hospital in the car if you know it doesn't get there. There are of course many more serious examples out there.
No, I'm sorry, a sick pet is not a silly example. I mean, obviously a sick person is more serious, but it's not silly to the owner of the pet, is it? We Insulate Britain, according to the Mail on Sunday yesterday, they had an undercover reporter at a meeting between Insulate Britain members. So they were going to give the government a 10-day ultimatum to act on their demands to have more insulation in people's houses. I know it's a strange demand. Or they would unleash hell. But what does that mean? Tracey Mallaghan is a spokesperson for Insulate Britain and joins us now. Good morning to you, Tracey.
Good morning, Julia. Good morning. I've been listening this morning and I'm really hoping we can have a good conversation. We agree on so much, right? We're in this mess because of our government's failure to predict the predictable, because they keep waiting till the second, and our country has been divided. But where we disagree is quite important, like your absurd assertions that we're in this mess because of moving to different energy rather than lowering our waste. And when you were talking to Catherine, who I thought was great, obviously we know kids leaving home that's warm, cosy, with full bellies is hugely important to their educational.
Right. Can I ask you a question now?
Yes, of course.
Lovely.
That's why I'm here.
Let's try the traditional interview technique. What did your Insulate Britain members mean by talking about unleashing hell on British drivers?
Well, I wasn't in that training session. Our David, I'm sure we couldn't have even said that with a straight face. It was a training session, you know. We're all really traumatised by what we're doing. None of us like sitting on the roads. And we're trying to get the truth out to people about the mess that we're in and battling with media like this. So I'm sure it was a slip of the tongue.
A slip of the tongue. You say we're all traumatised. This was, you say, a training meeting. But I mean, I've never been to training meetings where we talked about unleashing hell on other people because the government doesn't do what we've told them to do.
Well, have you ever been to a meeting where you're recognising that the government is unleashing hell with its failure to predict the predictable and prepare, right? Have you ever been to a meeting where you're testing? Hang on, let me finish.
Tracey, I feel very strongly about a lot of issues: lockdown, vaccine passports, but the idea that I would talk about, even as a slip of the tongue, unleashing hell on other people who have nothing to do with any of those policies, I would find utterly bizarre. That's the thing. If you've got a battle you want to take to the government, that's a battle you should take to the government. But why on earth do you have to involve innocent motorists going about their daily business, trying to get their kids to school, visit relatives, run their businesses, put food on the table, pay their rent and their mortgages?
Oh, you're so very good at this misdirection. Those people we're disturbing are affected by government policy. Those people we're sadly disrupting are the ones who are more likely to fall into fuel poverty. They're the ones that don't quite understand the mess we're in. And
are they a bit stupid? Is that what you think? The drivers are all a bit stupid. They're not clever like you.
Look, I think we can all agree it was really difficult to hear Boris Johnson at the UN telling everyone they had to grow up. Well, he talked about romper rooms, the Muppets, and treating the planet like his own personal toy. But it must have been really difficult for you, Julia, to hear him admit that he'd been part of climate denial, apologise for it, and say that, emotionally we have to connect. I'm wondering how that was for you, because you're still clinging to this, aren't you? It's not real.
Whatever Boris Johnson says or does has no bearing on anything I think or do at all, I'm afraid. We are separate human beings. I think that net zero is an absurd, insane and immoral and mad target. Yes. I think you tackle climate change with technological innovation, and you don't do it by immiserating millions of people, both here in Britain and impoverishing the third world. So yes, we're going to disagree on our tactics here.
We're talking about asking anybody to change their lifestyles,
yes,
right?
We are.
We're talking about
we are.
People. We are talking in Insulate Britain about making people's lives better. How
are you making people's lives better by leaving them on the motorway for hours on end?
Let me finish, eh? right? Let me finish. We are talking about getting people out of fuel poverty. 8,000 of us are going to die this winter from living in unsuitable housing. Now, if the government had got on with that 2 decades ago, we wouldn't be wasting so much energy. So we wouldn't be in this energy crisis now, would we? What we waste from our homes...
Yes, we would. Yes, we would be in the same energy crisis right now, Tracey. What we waste in our homes, yes, I'm all for insulating more homes, but given that a large number of the members of your organisation themselves don't have insulated homes, you can kind of identify the problem. It costs a lot of money, it involves a lot of building work, a lot of damage. A lot of people don't want it done. 8,500 people don't die because their homes aren't insulated. They die because they can't afford to heat their homes, and because their bills going up, because we don't have reliable, cheap, affordable and secure energy. And that's got, frankly, sod all to do with whether someone's got insulation in their walls.
Oh, Julie, that's absurd. And earlier, you really upset me, actually. You said people are dying from the cold and because they haven't got meat on their bones. You're right. That's because people are in malnutrition, right? People are choosing between heating and eating. Now, I'm glad you brought up money, because the reality is our government can currently borrow money at its cheapest interest rates in its history. Alongside that, our government are currently paying the lowest amount of interest on its debts in its recorded history. So why are our government refusing to invest in our future, in the future of the children, and in getting people out of fuel poverty, Julia?
I think, Tracey, a lot of people will agree with the idea we should probably have more insulated homes, and certainly we should concentrate on people on the lowest incomes in social housing and insulating their homes. Absolutely. The issue people have is with your extreme claims and your extreme methods, because this is something that you should be lobbying the government on. You should be lobbying other political parties, getting pressure, maybe getting a private members bill, but bringing this issue to notoriety. I mean, goodness me, you can get on BBC and Sky any day of the week with any climate issue. They'd love to have you. You don't need to be causing so much disruption and distress to so many ordinary people. You don't need to be making threats. We live in a democracy. We persuade, we convince, we discuss and we debate. We don't make threats, and we don't say we'll unleash hell if we don't get our way. That's not how we do things in a democracy.
Well, unfortunately, our democracy is a bit broken. What we have
is... Well, it is, because people like you keep breaking it.
Come on, sweetheart, play fair. We have government
You
and
don't
media
play fair. You don't play fair.
Lies, misdirection, and as a mum, the only way I get to talk to my people and break the deadlock that the media and government have on the truth is by creating disruption.
Are you a conspiracy theorist claiming that the media and the government aren't talking about issues like climate change? Where have you been the last 10 years? It's all they talk about.
In misdirected ways. You yourself are saying, right, quite clearly that you don't agree with the Chatham House report. There are many people out there who do not understand the crisis that we are in.
We're not in a crisis. We're not in a crisis. That's the whole point. We're not in a crisis.
You don't think we're in a crisis. Your personal life.
It's a matter of opinion, isn't it? That's the whole point. And that's why we debate things in a democracy.
I am suffering from the fuel crisis, from the energy crisis, from the lack of care, from the defunding of everything in our community. I and millions of Brits are suffering, Julia. You might not be, but many of us are.
Millions of people are suffering from high energy prices because they're having part of what they have to pay is a subsidy for renewables, and because Tracey, I thought we were playing fair, and because we haven't invested in cheap, reliable fuel like nuclear and shale gas, both of which I'm assuming you oppose.
Absurd, absolutely absurd what you're saying. We waste more from our houses than all of the cars in Britain. We waste more. Now, you really should be on board with stopping the waste of energy. The more that we save, the less that we waste, the less that we will need. And people's bills could come down by 90% more. 90% reduction in my heating bill. I need that now, Julia.
Tracey,
I really wish
that's an absolute load of abject nonsense, what you've just said. It is absolute nonsense, and you could put fantastic insulation all around. I mean, why don't we just box in people's windows, because all the energy that goes out of people's windows, and everyone just live in the dark under a duvet.
Shame on you, Julia, having this platform.
Okay.
Shame on you. It's a really dangerous game.
Yes, you want to use rude language on my show. I'm afraid we do actually have to remove that, so people might hear a little glitch in their interview there because of some of the language Tracey used. Again, you don't seem to be very happy with having just a debate and a conversation and being able to back up what you have to say with facts. You resort to abuse and you resort to threats to the British people. Isn't this part of the problem?
The problem is we have been lied to for decades. For decades, our government has refused to get on with the job of insulation, and people like you are calling me absurd for telling the truth. If we'd have got on with insulating our houses, I wouldn't have such high energy bills right now.
So you're an insulate truther. I don't think anyone has ever said it's a bad idea to insulate people's homes. I think people have put now the government did have an insulate project in which they then scrapped. Okay, again, that's an issue. That's an issue that's worth discussing and debating and bringing to the fore. But you don't have to cause misery to, and it does cause misery to millions of people's lives because they go, I don't know if the M25 is going to be blocked today or not. Can I risk going on that route? People trying to go about their daily lives. If you want to take it, you want to have a protest outside Parliament every single day, you're totally entitled to do that. But ruining other people's lives and ruining their livelihoods is not acceptable. It's bullying, it's blackmail, and it's not right in a democracy.
Oh, come on, Julia. You didn't listen to me. Many of us, millions of us, our lives are being ruined by government inaction today. Short-term, temporary disruption is nothing compared to the millions of us who are actually living in fuel poverty this year, right? It's nothing compared to over 8,000 people dying from malnutrition and poor housing. You can laugh at
They're not dying of malnutrition and poor housing. They're dying because they can't afford to heat their homes because the heating bills are too high.
And what does that mean to you? So what does that mean,
sweetheart? I just pointed out that you're wrong.
You're wrong. You can't even hear it. People are having to choose between heating and eating. I'm telling you that. And you're going, no, Tracey.
Because they can't afford their heating bills. It's nothing to do with the insulation and what you're doing. Tracey, this is the basic problem. You think everyone who doesn't agree with you is a malign, malignant, horrible force. This is you can't have a grown-up debate in a democracy if you're going to assume that everyone else is telling lies all the time.
You're so not logical. I hope you listen to this back and realise how ridiculous you sound, Julia.
Okay.
People are in trouble. You're saying we're in trouble because we can't afford to pay our heating bills, but that's got nothing to do with the fact if our insulation had been done, our heating bills would lower. Because our heating bills are high, we can't afford to eat. Can you not see how that all fits together? You're being very...
Well, I find it interesting. If everyone's so concerned about it, why is it that virtually everyone we found from Insulate Britain who's got their own home has not insulated it? I'm sure if you watch this back, you will see similar issues. I'm going to get the thoughts of Bobby Friedman on this in just a few moments, but 8:47 is the time. This, deep sighs, is Talk Radio. Good morning to you. This is Talk Radio Breakfast with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. An awful lot of messages coming in from you about that interview with Tracey. Let's get the thoughts of Bobby Friedman, who's a barrister and political commentator. It's quite painful, Bobby, talking to these people, every single one of them.
Well, previously I thought that they didn't engage in debate because they're unreasonable. But having heard that, I think maybe they don't engage in debate because they're not very good at it. It was interesting, wasn't it?
Let's go with that word. But it's just coming back to the same issue again and again, which is totally unproven. I find bizarre.
But what I find awful is that it's these people who are shutting down our country, is stopping people going to work on the basis of that degree of reasoning and logic. And that is why we have debating. As I say, I perfectly agree with insulating our homes. I actually think it's a good idea.
It'd be a weird thing not to agree with.
Yeah, but that's why we have debate and process and laws, because otherwise you end up with someone like that being the person who determines whether you can get a sick parent to hospital or not.
Yeah, and again, that is the key thing, isn't it? It's like, this is what I feel strongly about, and therefore the government must act or we'll make threats. That's just, sorry. I mean, there's loads of things I feel very strongly about. And people will know over the last year, lockdowns, vaccine passports. Like, sorry, but you don't make threats against, ordinary law-abiding members of society trying to go about their daily lives in order to get that. Thank you very much indeed for that, Bobby. I think the long pause kind of said it all, really. Let's talk about something quite new now.